welcome in. This is Stuck in the Catch Fence. I'm your host, Ryan Peters, joined by my favorite co host, Joe Spillman.
Hey, how are you, Ryan?
Good. We got a great quick segment for you today. We have possibly learned some news and wanted to share with you guys. I have not seen this put out much on YouTube, so wanted to share it with you guys directly. Joe, you sent this to me earlier today, and let's just
Yeah.
get right into it. What did you share with me earlier today?
Well, I was scouring the NASCAR news as I do every day, Ryan, because I'm addicted to NASCAR, and I came across an article that said Kurt Busch has been cleared to return.
That's right. And I was really surprised when you sent that to me. Do want to preface it. The source that we're using, it's more conjecture, so a little bit of hypothetical. You will not get a statement from Kurt Busch saying, I've been cleared, I'm going to start racing again. But Joe, it sounds like he tiptoed everything around it and said exactly all that besides actually saying that.
I know it. I know it. Yeah. So, um, I'm going to take this for what it's worth. I think Kurt Busch is going to, as you know, he's still employed by 2311, and I think that he is going to say all the right things and do all the right things in this process. I think we saw last week. We listened to Kurt Busch in the booth at COTA. Obviously, very emotional. You could tell the fight is still in him to go out race and race. He wants to be in a race car. I don't think his career is over at this point. I think the announcement or kind of that, retirement was a little premature. I think before it's all said and done with, we're going to see Kurt Busch back in a race car. And I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see him back in a race car this year in some sort, form, or fashion.
Oh, I mean, I think that's the hope for everybody is that we get to see him sooner rather than later. It was kind of a shock to the NASCAR world. I mean, that he's been out this long.
Right.
And now that we have at least some sort of news, and the source of this news really comes from an interview from SiriusXM on NASCAR, and he said again, kind of led into it. But before we get to like the actual what he said and things of that nature, Joe, I also wanted to show, and you guys are probably aware, we've been able to put our shorts background and something we've been working on here as the background to our videos. That will be something we look to do moving forward. So if you like that, make sure you check that out. We have a nice little dirt track catch fence there, and some running tickers. We'll do things like that. We got a betting show coming up, so you'll see
Yeah.
all the odds and things. So, like I said, this is a show to grow with, and we're trying to do everything we can technologically to make that happen as well. So, if you do like what you see, let us know. If you got some suggestions, let us know. That being said, let's go ahead and get to the article. We've teased it long enough,
Yeah.
and this is
So what we're looking at is an article by Essentially Sports. Basically, broke this article today, and what it's saying is it's kind of recapping an interview that Kurt Busch did with Sirius Satellite Radio, um, and about the possibility of him returning to a Cup car. You could visit and read the article yourself if you head on over to Essentially Sports. But really, we're kind of here to break down. After reading this, we're kind of here to break down what the article is and maybe the possibilities of Kurt Busch returning.
reading that and hearing what he had to say. To me, number one, they're already having discussions for a third team, a third
Right.
charter team. And we've heard Denny Hamlin talk about that he would like to wait at least when it comes to the new TV deal before making any type of determination whether or not 2311 is going to run a third car. And then also talking about getting back in and doing some laps and things of that nature, getting his body ready for the grind that is a NASCAR race. Those are the big things that highlighted to me that even if he's not all the way clear, maybe for contact, he is at least mentally preparing himself, Joe, to get back into a stock car.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. However, I kind of have a fix for 2311 as it is. Uh, let's just get rid of Bubba Wallace. You got an open car already.
Yeah.
So
Do you think that, I mean, okay, if we're betting people, what odds would you give after giving an extension to Bubba Wallace that you think that they just go ahead, pay out his deal, and say, "Hey, appreciate what you've done here. No, we're going to get Kurt Busch." a NASCAR champion back in a car.
That's highly unlikely to happen, especially with the deal that he just got. So I doubt very seriously that. That's just me kind of spitballing. That's not going to happen, obviously.
The funny thing, we've already seen things happen where Tyler Reddick foregone a final year. I mean, made a year in advance a deal, and I think the NASCAR landscape's moving forward towards other types of sports.
Right.
It's not uncommon for a player to get cut. I mean, we're Bengals fans. I think right now more of us would be more surprised if Joe Mixon didn't get paid to leave at this point.
Yeah.
So I would not be surprised if NASCAR starts following suit. I agree with you. I think it's highly unlikely. But at the end of the day, Joe, doesn't it make more sense to save in money on the short term when it comes to saying, "Hey, Bubba, we're going to pay out the rest of your contract," than running three cars?
I think. Well, that's a very good point. Let me ask you this though: do you think that they'll do that with the optics of the situation? And what I mean by that is, so obviously Bubba Wallace has been portrayed the last several years. We did a show about this as kind of trying to push him into the role of being the face of NASCAR. That hasn't worked out real well for them, obviously. But I think with today, and this is just me using a logical brain here, with today's political environment, I don't think there's any way that Bubba Wallace gets the boot. And I'm not trying to be controversial with that. I'm just trying to be realistic. So I think really at the end of the day, if we see Kurt Busch make a return, it's going to be a return in a third car for 2311 full time in the Cup Series.
So you're saying, given the optics of it, there's no way 2311 makes that call.
I think so. I mean, I would be very surprised if they do. And you can only imagine how that story would be spun in the national media.
So Kurt Busch, I believe, is 44 years old. He's getting up there in age. I'll fact check that here in just a second. But the way that I look at it, Joe, is like if you were ever going to do something to where the optics make sense, 2311 has it by putting a champion in a ride.
Right.
It'd be one thing if this was Ty Gibbs, or, if this was just another guy that's not, say, came from, where Bubba came from in Legacy Motorsport, what used to be, Petty Motorsports, and say it was Eric Jones or something of that nature. I think that would be easy to, start a firestorm. But at the end of the day, if you're looking at numbers, if you're looking at things that matter, if you're looking at marketability, I mean, we've already seen it that, Bubba Wallace is not a well-liked person at the racetrack. And this is coming from somebody been to multiple racetracks.
Right.
I'm not just saying one racetrack. I'm not just saying what I heard on TV. We were there. We saw two people wearing Bubba Wallace stuff, and we heard thousands of them boo. And it's been that way for the last 3 years that I've been going to the track since 2020. So, I mean, I think maybe he has some marketability when it comes to it, but at the end of the day, if we're worried about saving money in motorsports, I just don't understand why you wouldn't say, "Hey, Bubba, we're going to give you your," and we don't know driver salaries; these are hypothetical. We're going to give you your $3 million because it's going to cost us at least 20. We do know that, to get another charter.
No, no. I look, Ryan. I absolutely agree with you. I'm not saying that um, that would not be the best business decision. I guess is what I'm trying to say. I absolutely agree. I just think that politics in this situation are going to take over. I just don't think there's any way. Look, it and Bubba Wallace should not be in a Cup car today as we speak. He was moved to the Cup Series too early. He obviously does not have the talent to compete in the Cup Series. He's never going to win a championship. He's never going to win a race outside of a super speedway, probably. And if he does win a race, it's going to be because he backed into it. Is he going to run a good race every once in a while and possibly be competing for a win? Sure, but so is Corey LaJoie. I actually think Corey LaJoie gives you a better chance of winning a Cup championship at some point than Bubba Wallace ever will. He doesn't have the temperament to compete at the highest level in NASCAR. He doesn't have the talent, and he was pushed into being the picture of NASCAR. Some things outside of his control happen, but for better or worse, he is one of the most disliked drivers in the sport. He doesn't have the talent to compete with a team that's obviously going to be at the top echelon of the sport for the next several years. You're absolutely right. The best business decision is to cut ties with him, run, put Kurt Busch back in a car, and see what you can do. Who's who's going to be a much better teammate to Tyler Reddick to begin with. So, at the end of the day, a good business decision and a political decision, as you know, are two separate things, and I think the political decision will win out here.
Look at it this way too, Joe. And I'm not saying, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, or trying to say that you're saying something a different way. I'm literally just hypothetically asking these questions
Right,
of, business wise, competition wise, uh just I mean, everything besides optics says you should do this without hesitation. So my other thought process goes this way. Kurt Busch is 44. So I was right about that after my fact check. He will be 45. The oldest driver in NASCAR right now is Kevin Harvick, and this is his last year, and he's 45 years old. So making a commitment to Kurt Busch, coming off an injury, coming off of not being in a car, which will be at least a year. I mean, we know that for sure. It'll at least be a year. He's not racing this year in a
right,
stock car unless he fills in or something like that happens. Let's just put it this way. Say Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan aren't ready to go for 23-11 racing, putting in a third team. Where do you think that Kurt Busch could land? Because it sounds like he's got a lifetime guarantee from everything we've heard. Denny Hamlin has said that, and Michael Jordan has backed that up. Do you think that they would then say, hey, we don't have the finances right now for an open spot. We don't care if you go race because at the end of the day, you're a driver. You want to get back in that car. When you're done racing, your spot at 2311 is going to be here forever. Hopefully, it's up in the NASCAR booth because we could take out Clint Boyer with that. That would
right.
be great for all of us. But do you think there's a spot that he could land for 1 to 2 years to get back in a cup ride? And if you were, again, going to make odds on it, where would that be?
Well, there are a couple. There are a couple places, and I think, I think obviously, I think there are some drivers at JGR that are probably going to be on their way out here.
That's the
Uh,
first thing comes to my mind. Yep.
so I think that possibly, out of those four cars, I think that there's definitely going to be. I mean, when you look at Truex, I just don't see him extending very, much longer with JGR. So I think if it's not going to be at 23-11, and knowing how intertwined those two teams are, I think it very well he could end up at JGR if he is indeed able to get back into a car.
That would be my number one. I agree with you 100%. And that's the exact right I was thinking of too, is Martin Truex Jr. He signed a 1 year deal to come back. He is not. We have this persona, this perception of Martin Truex as being a championship caliber driver every time he gets on the track, and unfortunately for him, it's just not. It hasn't been that since
Right.
the next gen car. Um, be that what it may. Another thing too is, we've always talked about Denny Hamlin moving to 2311. Well, if Kurt Busch isn't going to get the third charter, we know Denny Hamlin's not going to pay out of his pocket to be the third car there either. So I agree with you. I think that would be the most common sense place to go unless Toyota is able to flip a team next year. And I think that's a real possibility. I think we're going to have a dark horse coming into this offseason that Toyota does flip somebody from Ford or Chevy to Toyota.
Right.
And I'm not going to say it may be Stewart-Haas Racing,
Oh man.
because that would be a team that they need some shot in the arm, Joe.
Right.
And what better way for them to go, you need a shot in the arm, we need a shot in the arm. Let's work together to figure out what we can do
Yeah.
to get back into prominence. And I think that could be a possibility. We already know that Kurt Busch has had, at least worked with Tony Stewart before because he drove the number 41 car for Stewart Haas Racing. So I think that is probably a pretty long shot and a lot of things. Again, there's a lot of hypotheticals to this show because we're trying to find a way to fit all these puzzle pieces together. But at the end of the day, I think what we all agree on is Kurt Busch is talented enough to get back to racing in the NASCAR and being competitive immediately in the right car. And the last thing I wanted to bring to you when it comes to this, you're Michael Jordan or you're Denny Hamlin, and we no, you're not either one of those
No, I am
people.
not. I wish I
Okay.
was.
I mean,
Well, I don't
you
wish
do
I
great.
was them. I would just like to maybe have their money.
It's not bad. I was going to say talent, but that's okay.
No,
Money
I
is
don't. No, I don't
also
need talent if I have that kind of money. I don't need to do anything.
I can buy talent
Right.
optically.
Right.
What do you do? I was the first person to do a quadruple backflip in the Olympics. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't really believe that. Here's $100. You know what? I think it's possible.
Yeah.
So,
I don't need talent. But anyway, go ahead.
uh, no, I look at it from this standpoint. Say you're Michael Jordan. Say you're Denny Hamlin. Are you really going to mitigate the future of your team and not let at least on the racetrack, at least in the garage, because you can only do so much without being behind the wheel to give Bubba Wallace the optic ride and not let him work with Tyler Reddick, that being Kurt Busch, every single day, because we know the type of knowledge that both Kurt and Kyle Busch do. What they provide in the garage as a driver will help your budding superstar. Tyler Reddick has more wins since July of last year than any driver.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I saw that stat the other day. That is not that is not just a coincidence. I think, both of us agree that Tyler Reddick's a really good driver. And
Right.
if you're 23-11, you're still young. Why in the heck would you say we'd rather Bubba Wallace stay as a teammate than try to let him grow? Because Bubba Wallace is 30 years old. It's not like he's just some spring chicken, which in NASCAR's not old. But at the end of the day, he sure as hell ain't young.
Right.
And he's not doing anything to benefit your team, and he's not going to help your superstar grow. And I just look at it that way. If I'm Michael Jordan, and maybe it's the Charlotte Bobcat Michael Jordan or Charlotte Hornets or Charlotte Failures, whatever you want to call it. Maybe that's the Michael Jordan that's trying to run this team. But if I look at it in Denny Hamlin, I go, we cannot keep screwing this up. We have two young stars at Toyota and Christopher Bell and Tyler Reddick. We're not going to keep these guys here unless they have competitive teammates to help them get to victory lane as well.
Yeah. No, I can't disagree with you, and definitely I don't think there is any argument that can a legitimate argument I'll say that can be made as to why Bubba Wallace is your person at 23-11. I think that Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan both have to know that. I actually feel like just based on every interview that he does, I have yet to see an interview over the last couple of years, except when we're talking about a race win, where that guy's happy and he portrays himself like a normal human being to the camera. I mean, obviously, what happened to COTA, him taking out Kyle Larson, well, not taking him out, but spinning out Kyle Larson. It was obviously his fault, whether it be for brake failure or whatever. I just think that the guy doesn't know how to brake coming into that turn or going into turn one like he did, and I think that his brakes just locked up on him. I think that was purely driver failure. You could say whatever you
He
want, but
agrees. He agreed with you. I mean,
yeah.
he said it was a failure on
Um,
his driving.
so you know, but the what he says is, well, if he would say something like, but I live up to my mistake. It is what it is. I got to get better. And then walk off, knowing that he's disappointed. Okay, but to say things like, maybe I need to be replaced, and that's just throwing fuel on the fire, because when you say stuff like that, the entire fanship of NASCAR goes, well, yeah, you're right. You do need to be replaced. So let's get out of that car. Maybe you should just quit. Um, I don't think he's going to get any better. I don't see Bubba Wallace getting any better. Kurt Busch is Kurt Busch. You know what you're going to get. And yeah, as Kurt Busch gets older, is he going to decline? Yeah, that's what he that's what people do. But a 50-year-old Kurt Busch is going to be better than Bubba Wallace is ever going to be in his entire career. So, take that for what it's worth, I guess.
What's weird is not I don't think of Kurt Busch the same age as Kevin Harvick. I don't know why. I mean, I guess I should because I mean Kurt Busch started in NASCAR earlier than Kevin Harvick did. I mean, I remember that Sharpie, Dodge that he used to drive and things of that nature. But I just have never viewed Kurt Busch to the same extent when it comes to being as old as he is. But at the same time, let me just lay this out quickly, before we get just people thinking that we're just bashing Bubba Wallace for anything more than why we just don't really care for him as a driver. Number one, and I can go down a whole list of things. Alex Bowman and him getting a disagreement. Alex Bowman clearly is having a dehydration issue, comes up to him and throws liquid in his face as he's getting treated medically. Number two, he comes out of a race after some slight contact at Las Vegas, then tries to fight Kyle Larson
After
based
right
upon
after right hooking him into the
after
wall.
right, yeah, right after right hooking. That's definitely a good point. And then tries to fight him afterwards while cars are still going around the track. Number two, Bubba Wallace has one of two types of interviews, and you mentioned one of them. He's either it's almost to the point he's hard on himself to where it sounds like pity, if that makes sense. Because there's one way of saying, I made some mistakes out there. I got to find a way to clear those up. And, I got a good team behind me and we'll get in a better headspace. And, I feel bad for the guys and bad for my sponsor, but, we'll put things together. We'll get it fixed and we'll come back next week fighting. You
Right.
never hear that type of interview. It's, well, two rookie mistakes in a row. Somebody else should be driving this car. Bye. And this is coming from a Kyle Busch fan. I trust me. I know how interviews can be handled. You know, Kyle Busch has the credence of at least winning races, so he doesn't get that same type of, flexibility when it comes to just sounding like an asshole when it comes to an interview. The other type, Joe, is yeah, nobody believes in me. Nobody believes in me. I hope I shut everybody up. And it's like you can't have it both ways. You can't say you don't belong in NASCAR and then blame people for criticizing you whenever that you see
Well,
stuff
yeah.
about your driving. It's like it's both ways all the time with him. And those are just some of just the things about listening to Bubba Wallace. Joe, it's always about Bubba Wallace. And the thing that is the number one truth, he was never like that until 2020.
Yeah.
That is not the type. Bubba Wallace used to be a dude with other lower series drivers in terms of the manufacturer, or not the manufacturer, in terms of their teams, that was playing football with the fans, that was always having a good time. And whatever happened to him, whatever direction, either the media in terms of NASCAR or in terms of whatever the world perception of his was, he did not handle it well. He has not lived with it well. And I think a part of him inside, Joe, feels guilty because he has been put on a platform that he does not deserve in terms of being marketed that way. And I think that some part of him does not like the way that he's portrayed, and he wants to be known as a NASCAR driver, and everybody knows him for something else. But he also didn't have to feed into it.
You're
And that's the biggest part of it.
you are absolutely right. And 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 I think for from a sponsor standpoint, I guess is what I'm trying to say. If you think if
You're
you're
McDonald's. Go ahead.
yeah, you're McDonald's, you're Bubba Wallace's sponsor. You're not getting your money's worth out of that guy anyway. I mean, it just you talk about the interviews. I mean, to the point where you watch any NASCAR movie, Talladega Nights, and how ridiculous and over the top they are with saving their or saying their sponsors. You know that happens in NASCAR, right? I want to
Yeah.
think the Good Wrench Double A battery Chevrolet. You know that is part of being a sponsor. You get your name dropped. When's the last time Bubba Wallace did an interview and you heard him mention his sponsor?
Good point.
So from a purely marketability standpoint, as him as your driver, you're not getting your money's worth as a sponsor. And if I'm a sponsor, I'm going to say, you know what, we don't want to sponsor that guy anymore. So, and outside of that, what the obvious cancer he is to his 2311 team, you know, this goes all the way back to, yeah, the best business decision is probably to cut ties with Bubba Wallace. So, I mean, I just, like I said before, I just don't see something like that happening.
No, and I don't either, and that's why, I want to clear these things up because you can interject whatever falsehood you would like to why we don't like Bubba Wallace, and maybe you take this as this being more about Bubba than Kurt Busch. It's not. We're simply trying to find a spot for Kurt Busch, and the most obvious answer is get rid of the guy that's not performing on your team. I mean, so that's why we have to bring these things up, and at the same time say, these are the reasons why too. I mean, the guy can't even get on iRacing and quit on television because he gets mad
Right.
in a freaking virtual video game.
Yeah.
I mean, for God's sakes, I haven't done that since last week.
Yeah.
Since I was 10.
Since 20 minutes
Oh,
ago.
that's not had it coming though, but seriously.
Right.
So, at the end of the day, I think what we should get out of this is I'm ecstatic as hell that Kurt Busch has an opportunity to race again. If the stars are aligning that way, I think Kurt Busch, for somebody who was much maligned, somebody who was booed himself, has found a way to turn himself around to the point now people are even feeling emotional, Joe, when he gets emotional on television. And that's raw. I mean, that's why people like certain people,
Right.
is because they feel the authenticity. When you hear a driver go, I'm supposed to be in that ride, watching the number 45, knowing what he still has left in the tank, knowing that he was medically taking out of that vehicle something he's done his entire life, that really hit home with a lot of fans. That was not canned. That was, I wish I really could be in that car. And Joe, you know this more than anybody as somebody that's been in sports. We've been around sports. We want things that are authentic. That's why I like Kyle Busch, because I think he's the most authentic driver out there, whether you want to hear it or not. And on the opposite side, we got to hear the authenticity of Kurt Busch. And I think he gained a lot of fans.
He did.
Even in it was as clearly he was hurt,
Right.
but gained a lot of fans that I think are now all rooting for him.
But and that's the thing though. It was very authentic, and he was hurt, but at the same time, he was very happy to see his former car in victory lane as well. So you kind of got to take a look into Kurt Busch's personality a little bit there. It kind of it saddened him that he was not driving that car, but he was also happy that his team is making leaps into victory lane as well. So
Yeah. And one last thing, and we'll wrap this up. I saw that there was some criticism towards him for rooting for 2311 Racing. And Mike Joy quickly went to Twitter and said, these are the reasons why we wanted him up here. This is not his job. He is not employed by Fox Sports. He
right,
was literally hired to be up there for a race. So to tell Kurt Busch to not be himself would have been a disservice, number one, to us,
right.
the listener, the viewer, and then number two, to Kurt Busch. He is not a robot. The last thing we want, and the funny thing is, Joe, all the drivers that have been on NASCAR broadcasts this year have been great outside the retired one, Clint Boyer.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I'm about done listening to that guy anyway. So
but again, we want to thank you for joining us. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like, comment down below what you think about Kurt Busch returning. If you had an opportunity to employ Kurt Busch, would you do it at 44 years old, based upon where you're at right now? And do you agree, if you only have two cars and you're Michael Jordan, do you let Bubba Wallace go? Or do you just say, I'm Michael Jordan, I have the most money in the entire world, I can pay $20 million for a team anyway?
right.
So we will see. We will have qualifying in the morning. I believe it is at around 10 or 11. So Joe and I will be putting out our betting video. We'll have all your picks ready for you. Another NASCAR lineup. as we try to make you some money as well. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. We'd love to keep you around long term. Notifications don't mean anything, but if you would like to hit the bell, both figuratively and literally, you can try that and see what happens. Joe, do you have anything else before we sign off?
No, no, don't forget to like and subscribe. And like I said, very shortly, let you guys know on our last show, very shortly, we're going to have a couple top 10 videos or a top 10 video coming out. And I think everybody will enjoy that as well.
Also, we're also halfway to, or a little over halfway now to our 500 subscriber milestone. And whenever we get to that, we will be having a giveaway. So make sure you join us for that as well. All good things like Kentucky Speedway at some point have to come to an end. And that's where we are in this show. This has been Stuck in the Catch, Vince. We'll see you next time.